Welcome everybody to today's session, Domino Application Strategy, Key Insights for Successful Modernization and Migration Projects. My name is Franz Walder. I'm Product Manager here at Panagenda, and I will talk to you a little bit today about the things that we have learned with our customers going through their projects. First, let me tell you a little bit what we will see today. I will introduce Panagenda first. Then I will talk a little bit about why you should care to listen to me, why this is interesting, what I'm talking about today. Next, we have a little area that I call project scope, facts or fiction. I'm going to talk a little bit about how realistic project goals or unrealistic project goals sometimes are and what we can do to make our projects more successful. And the big part of this session today is going to ask questions. Ask the right questions to make your project a success. Now, first, a little bit about Panagenda. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just going to give you a little bit of an idea who we are. We have customers in over 70 countries, and those customers run more than 11 million licenses of our solutions. And maybe by today, we're already at 12 million licenses. The end of the year is always busy and interesting, but you get an idea. We come around quite a bit. So our solutions introduce analytics, optimization, and management in your collaboration landscape. And with this, we help our customers be more efficient, reduce manual effort and risk, and at the bottom line, we help our customers to save cost. Now, why should you care about what I am talking today? It doesn't matter really what your challenge is or what your project is. Our experience has been that whether you are just doing a consolidation or you're modernizing your environment or you're migrating, moving your elements or moving your infrastructure to the cloud, moving to a different platform, the questions that you need answered remain largely the same, at least up to a certain point. And this is what we are aiming to do with this presentation or with this session here. We're going to start asking and finding out what the key questions are that you need answered. If you're anything like the majority of our customers, then your Nodes Domino environment has grown over many years or even decades. We've had customers who had nodes for 20 upwards years. You can imagine how much there has been going on, how many administrators and developers were part of your company, and how many of those had their own strategy about naming things, about the way how they program, about the way things are communicated, about the way things are documented. So there is your nodes environment has had a long history with a lot of people controlling it, and probably it has seen more reorganizations than most of your current staff. So maybe the people who were heads of departments 10 years ago and asked for an application to be developed, maybe they're not here anymore. Maybe their whole departments are not there anymore, and it has since been split up or combined with another department. The reason I'm telling you about this is when we come into a project, and most of the time, in my experience, those projects they come from a management level, or they are triggered by a management level, but have to be executed by project staff, Domino administrators. You would expect that, or management would expect that the Domino administrators or the project staff will have all these questions answered, that there will be an inventory, there will be a history, but it has grown over so many years, so it's very hard to have all this information. And we are talking about how to get it. Now, let me show you a little bit about project scope facts or fiction. So this is a little story I kind of drew myself. So if you have a project and that project has goals, you would hope that there is a healthy relationship between project goals and reality. Now, in the best case, project goals are realistic, but are they really? Now, one thing we know is that the project goals are going to influence the project scope, because I have to plan what I do, and that's going to be my project scope. And then the project scope over 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 turns will have to make that reality come true, or have to make these goals happen and become reality. And that's not always going to be easy. The question now is, how do you define the project scope to make those strategic goals reality? Because everybody knows this, I want to say, situation where management approaches the technical staff or the project staff and says, by the end of the year, we are going to be, I don't know, migrated to the cloud. By the end of the year, we're going to have all our applications accessible over the web. By the end of the year, we're going to be migrated away from nodes. No matter what these goals are, the question is, are they realistic? Because it's easy to set goals, it's harder to make it happen. Now, the question is, if we know these goals are unrealistic, do we have to redefine the goals to deliver a successful project? Because we as project staff and we as administrators and developers, we are going to be measured by whether our project is successful. And if we accept a project that cannot be done because it's absolutely unrealistic that by the end of the year, all our applications are going to run on the web, then we have to talk about it. We have to try and redefine the project. And the best way to do this is asking the right questions. It's very easy to be not taken serious if you say, these project goals are not realistic. Because people are going to say, oh, but you simply don't want to do the work, or you don't want to go away from nodes. It's hard to be taken seriously. So you need ammunition, you need facts to prove why you want to reshape the project, what you need to change to make the project successful. And the questions that we will be asking are the foundation to set up a successful project on. Now, before I go into those questions, let me quickly add something. We did a survey where we asked IT professionals 5 questions. And I've picked out the results, or those 3 of those questions for today. So I will mix the survey with the questions to give you a little bit of an idea what your peers say out there in regards to those questions that we will be talking about. Now, when we come into customer environments, one of the first things we do is talk to customers about the structure and the size of their environment, the magnitude, how big is the challenge. And there's a ton of little things here that aren't really, you know, it's hard to know. Let's say it's easy to know how many users are registered. It's harder to know how many of the users are active. It's easy to know how many servers are registered. It's harder to say how many different Domino releases and operating systems there are, how many databases are deployed. So these basic numbers are really important in setting the stage. Now, that leads us to a natural follow-up question, and maybe this is one of the questions that we get asked the most. How many databases are unused? And you would see me sometimes say databases, sometimes you will see me call them replica sets, sometimes you will see me call them applications. And just because we have translators here helping us out, and thanks, by the way, to all the translators for a great job. Whether I say databases or applications or replica set, it's all the same thing for this presentation. They are different things technically, but for now, they're the same thing. So how many databases are unused? And here I will bring in the first survey question that we asked our professionals. Would it be useful to easily identify unused applications? The average score was 9.1, and we gave our questionnaire takers the option from 1 to 10. So it was extremely highly ranked or highly rated as importance. Over 60% of the persons who took the survey ranked this with 10, with the highest score. And only 10% rated this lower than 5, so the middle. So obviously, this is an extremely important question that you are going to be faced with throughout your project. We're going to touch on usage a little bit throughout the presentation, but knowing usage is going to be a key for many things going forward. It starts out with simple questions like what is unused, what is little used, and what is very highly used. And from that, I can ask, what is my consolidation potential? Which databases can be deleted, archived, whatever you do with the databases you don't need. For some, you might have legal hold and you have to archive them. Others you can simply delete. Now, if we talk about the databases that can be deleted, it's also important to ask how many databases can be excluded from the project right away. For how many databases do I not even need to care to include them? And there's this funnel here that I want to show you, and this is one of the techniques that we use with our solution, is that we start by removing system databases, that we start by removing duplicates. So not duplicates, but more replicas of one database. So we really drill it down to the unique applications. Then we figure out and remove all these different database types that really nobody needs going forward, that are, for example, like I said, system databases or server mailboxes, stuff like that. And using these techniques, even without really knowing much of the environment at all, you can already achieve a big reduction in your project scope. And this is important because maybe you don't have an automated solution to do that, but simply by excluding these, I'm just going to call them system databases, you can achieve a big reduction. And then you start removing the unused ones, and then it slowly shrinks. So we're cutting the pie in smaller and smaller pieces. The next question is, how many users are actively using nodes? And this goes in both directions. The one direction is who is not using nodes. What licenses can I save? Since the user is not active, that user does not need a license, I can save on license cost. And in the other area, which users are very active, or which users use a lot of databases or only a few databases, that gives me the other angle. So which are my important users, or which are maybe databases used by a lot of users where maybe a user only uses one or two databases. That might mean if I remove these one or two databases, then suddenly I have another 1,000 users where I can save licenses on. Again, one of the more important questions that we get asked. The next question is, how does database design complexity impact redevelopment cost? So design complexity, you're going to hear that term a couple of times as well. The design is the database design that we collect from each application. So the forms, the views, all these design elements that make up how the database looks like. But also in some areas, the source code is part of looking at the design. Again, I'm bringing in a survey question here where we asked our professionals, where do you think application source code analysis can help you with your project? This was a multiple choice question. We had platform dependencies, migration roadblocks, calculating project effort, and also the option to say it's not urgent. Almost half said platform dependencies is where source code and design analysis can help them. More than 60% said migration roadblocks. More than 85% said that understanding the design and the source code will help them calculate project effort. Now, this is really interesting. Hardly anyone said not urgent, but the great point here and the great combination is that over 60% picked more than one answer. So two or more answers. Even though platform dependencies, calculating project effort was the top answer, the others were very often picked as well and picked in combination with others. So it's not a single thing where design and source code can help you. It's going to be a combination of many areas. And this is I'm bringing in the last survey question here for today because it's related. We asked, what is your greatest obstacle to migration or modernization projects? And this was an open-ended question. So customers could enter what they want. More than half mentioned a lack of development resources or skill. So customers are lacking the people to help them do their modernizations. They lack the expertise to bring them to new platforms, bring them to the web, to mobile environments fast enough. And this is a really important part. Now we come back to the original question. How do you think that understanding source code and design can help you? This is the answer, why it's important. Because if you know how Notes applications are developed, you will know, or maybe you don't know, we have found out in our analysis with customers that there's a tremendous amount of code duplication going on in Notes environments. And this is not a bad thing. It's simply the way how Notes works. There's a template and somebody copies the template, then the next person copies the template, and 5 years later, there is no relation between what started 10 years ago and what is now used. And that means a lot of code is being duplicated. Now, why is this important? If we find source code that needs fixing, for example, source code that will not work if you go to the web, and you find that same source code in 50 different applications, you don't need to fix it 50 times, because chances are it's going to be the same source code block in many of those applications, because the source code duplication is so high. So what you do is you have one developer that has very high skill and understanding, and then you have a couple of developers, and that one developer redevelops that source code blocks, and the other developers distribute it to the other applications that share the same source code blocks. And by that, remember what our survey takers said is that they are lacking resources. By that, we are reducing the high quality resources, the high quality developers we need, to a bare minimum. And then we have resources that may be not so knowledgeable because they have not been with the company for 20 years, who can do the simple tasks of just copying it or distributing it to other databases. I've shown here a little example of how that looks in our solution when we are looking for those source code blocks, and we are looking for in this example we're looking for OLE information, and then we fix one source code block, and then we see which databases we need to distribute it to. We work with regular expressions to identify and have the maximum flexibility identifying those source code blocks, but obviously you can work with whatever you want. But this is this one key ingredient: finding the code blocks, redeveloping the code blocks, and then bringing it to other applications. Now, the next question is, who are the application owners and who are the stakeholders in my project? Which departments, which persons, which locations is this application important for? And there's a couple of different, I want to say a couple of different areas why this might be important. First of all, if I am the project manager and I'm trying to reduce databases or let's say reshape databases, redevelop databases, I need to understand if what I'm doing and what I'm reshaping is, for one, worth being reshaped. Are people still using it? And if people are using it, what are they using it for? Are they using everything that there is in this application, or are they only using a part of the application? And I need a contact. I need persons to talk to help me decide. And that's exactly why we're looking for those application owners. Sometimes departments are a good idea. Other times locations are a good idea. And I've seen customers approach this from a lot of different angles. I've seen customers look at the ACL, looking who is manager, and have those take those as application owners. I've seen customers who have their own internal catalog where they can look up who requested these applications 15 years ago. But maybe the person who has access to it, who is manager, doesn't even know why this is important. Or maybe the person who requested this database 15 years ago is not in the company anymore, or the department doesn't exist anymore. So for us, it has shown that usage is the best way to finding owners. Understanding who writes a lot in this database, understanding who reads a lot from this database is going to go a long way for you to be able to find the persons you need to talk to. Because if you know who are your content authors, you know who will own this database. If you know who are your content readers, then you know who are stakeholders, and if I change this database, who is going to be affected? Which business processes will I influence? And also, who will help me pay if I have to redevelop this database? Which cost centers can I assign the cost to? There's a few different angles we have seen customers use this information. This is just an example where we say which departments use a certain application, but you can also use it from another angle and say, I want to look at the department, and I want to see which databases does my department use, to find out what is important for this department and for their business processes. Also, I might have a VIP department, management, etc., where I want to know these databases are used by my VIPs. I cannot, or if I'm a smart project manager, I want everything to go very well for those databases. So I will make special care with the databases that have management attention. Now, this quickly leads to the question of what are the most efficient paths forward for my application? And we get this question nearly from all customers. Doesn't matter if they are migrating away and going to SharePoint and they want to know which applications are good candidates for SharePoint, or if they're staying on nodes and they want to know which applications will be compatible with Nomad, or they want to know which databases will be hard or easy to bring on a mobile device or on a web interface. So this question of a path forward is really hard. One of the things that we do in our solution is we take the usage, as you can see here on the x-axis, we have the usage. So the highly used databases are on this side. And we put that on a chart together with design complexity. So the most complex databases are up top. And then what we get is, I want to say, a few quadrants. I have databases here, or applications or replica sets that are hardly used. And for those databases, those are my consolidation potential. Those are my archiving candidates. On the other hand, I have databases that have very high usage and very high complexity. We often find business critical databases here. So maybe those are not the first databases you will tackle when you develop, but they will be very important databases you have to keep track of. And then in the middle here, the blue ones is what I call quick win candidates, or low-hanging fruit. These have a great ratio between being used by a lot of persons, but still having a low complexity. So if you touch those databases, if you redevelop or update or redesign those databases, you're going to reach a broad audience with relatively little effort. So as you can see, only putting these two factors, usage and complexity, putting those next to each other, already helps you again to slice the pie into smaller pieces. This might not be the final answer, but it will give you another point to start, another point to move forward from. Now, we know that no single solution fits every application. And we also know that our customers always ask us, what is a good way forward for our application? In which way should I go with this application? And which way should I go with the other application? Much of it, to be honest with you, might be directed by your project goals. So if your management says, we're going to move everything to SharePoint, then you might just move stuff to SharePoint that doesn't make sense to move to SharePoint, or will cost a lot of money to make working halfway as well in SharePoint as it does in Notes. But those are your project goals. Or maybe some applications that have, where replication is a big thing, might not be as suited for a web application. But again, your project goals are dictating what you have to do. Important here in this situation for us as analytics solution. So I am a product manager of an analytics solution, and I get asked these questions. My opinion, and I've always stood by that, is that analytics must not have an agenda. I'm not going to tell you things you want to hear. I'm going to give you facts. I'm going to measure, and I'm going to give you facts. I'm not trying to sell you anything by my results. I'm not going to sell you SharePoint licenses or, I don't know, development tools or whatever. I am neutral. I'm looking at facts, presenting facts for you to make better decisions. However, we get asked a lot by customers what would be good paths forward for them. And there's two I want to mention here, because they have quite an interesting approach. One is Teamworker. They also had a session here, and they have a very new approach that helps you build beautiful interfaces for web and mobile in a couple of minutes, but it still keeps your Domino stuff in the background, so your Domino applications in the background, and it is a great solution for migration and modernization scenarios. It doesn't force you in any direction, and even if you are migrating away, there is some areas that you will still need to keep because it's applications that are too expensive to redevelop. So Teamworker is a nice compromise wherever you're going, and you get results relatively quickly, So that is one thing that I can recommend looking into. The other thing is 3/3, which is an amazing solutions hosting partner by 3 great partners that offer keeping your investment. So keeping your investment in the notes applications that you have, but cutting down on operating cost by just moving it to the cloud. You don't have to host your own servers anymore, but hosting them in the cloud. And this is for some customers, that's a problem. And rather than just getting rid of everything, why not move it to the cloud and let somebody else worry about the running of nodes? So those are two ways to go, that no matter what your end goal might be, this might be steps along the way, or for some, this might be the solution to to some of their project goals or project requirements. But let's come back here to understanding what is in my database and what path does my database dictate by simply understanding what it is and what is in my application. Actually, let me go back once and talk a little bit about this, or explain what I mean with content. When I say application content, I'm talking about the documents that are in a database. And those documents might be old, they might be new, they might be edited by different departments, or they might be edited by one department. There might be encryption or stuff like that, but we're going to jump into this right away. So when I say application content, I mean who created these documents and how were they created. What I'm not talking about in this situation is what is in the documents. I mean, so if you enter your name or your social security number or your address, this is one content, or this is one area deeper. I'm talking about content metadata in these upcoming questions. So the first question about content that we see, or let's say that we get asked, or are important if you are modernizing, or if you're migrating, or if you're looking to archive, is how old is the content? When were my documents created? When were my documents modified? Also, if you look at this visualization here, you can not only see in which years the content was created, but you can also see in which month users were active in this application. So here you could see seasonal applications that are only used during tax period, that are only used at the end of the year to close the business year. And sometimes it's very hard to identify those applications because they only see seasonal usage. And then sometimes maybe only a very small number of end users. Understanding this is really important if you decide what to do with this application. And that also already brings us to the list of editors. Who created and edited content in this application? From which department, from which location were documents edited? If you can imagine, if you start collecting usage about applications right now, there are different ways of gathering usage. You can go to the log NSF and look at the sessions, but you will only collect those in the future, let's say. There is not a lot of history in the logs when it comes to activity. Usually that is only 1 week. Some databases might have user activity enabled. where you can look at the history of the database. But if it's a very busy database, that usage will not be go back a long time, because the usage history is limited to about 1,000 entries. So if you have a very busy database used by a lot of users, you might only have a day or two of activity in there. And this brings us to the content analysis, because if you're looking at each individual document, you can find out when they were created, when they were modified, by whom were they modified. So this might not be the very best way of understanding usage, but is a sure way. Why do I say it's not the best way? Because in this, looking at usage from content, we only get write information. Lotus Notes or Lotus Notes, yeah. Notes in Domino only keep history of write events in the document. There is no history of read events. So we don't know who are my consumers. We only know who are my content creators, which can be fine and is great, but still, other usage collection methods also give you the read history, which can be important in other areas. Now, the next topic I want to talk a little bit about are attachments. How many attachments are there? How large are these attachments? And that's going to be a big factor in what you can do with the database, or where that guides us. If you have a lot of videos in the database, a lot of large files or CAD drawings, that's going to dictate what you can do, or where you can move the database, how you can present it on mobile devices and on Nomad maybe. Other areas are, is there design in those databases that is particularly important or dangerous in modernization? If you have OLE objects embedded in your notes, in your documents, that might be a big problem when it comes to webifying it or presenting it on a mobile phone. On the other hand, knowing which forms you have to modernize is going to be critical, because there can be hundreds of forms in a database, whereas only a small fraction of those might actually be used. So you can save a ton of effort knowing exactly what you have to touch and what you have to redevelop. And last but not least, document encryption and signature plays a huge role. If you have encrypted documents, you might not be able to get them to a target system, or you might not be able to use them with a new web interface without keeping with Domino security principles. The same with reader fields and author fields. So understanding these things before your project starts helps you not run into the troubles of starting a migration and then suddenly hitting a wall somewhere in the middle, and then understanding, oh, there is encryption in my database. Oh, I can't see half of the documents because I don't have the right roles. And then you have to go back and start again and figure out the next problem and start again and go back and forth. And that is something that is not the, that is not the mark of a successful product. So let me wrap it up and say, we've talked about the questions that we need to ask. And I'm just quickly going to sum this up. We talked about usage, which is the key to many things. We talked about design and code that helps us understand how complex it's going to be. And we talked about content that will help us find the roadblocks and avoid them before we run into them. Also, one little picture that I want to show you of a straightforward project. This is typically how it looks in my experience. You start down one route and then you get turned around, it goes up and down, and if you're prepared for that, then you're going to be more successful. With that, I say thank you very much for listening. Thanks to the translators for doing a great job. Thanks to everybody else who helped making this a success. And if there's any questions, please let me know.
Franz, спасибо вам огромное за эту лекцию.
Thank you so much for this lecture.
Вы очень круто ее структурировали, задавали сами вопросы, которые вы прекрасно знаете, какие бывают у пользователей.
So you structured it in a really cool way. You asked yourself questions that you know you receive very frequently from your users.
Поэтому у наших слушателей вопросов нет.
So that's probably the reason why our audience doesn't have any questions to you now.
Great.
Прекрасно.